Just like Proverbs 27 verse 17 says, iron sharpens iron. That's how Greg viewed his weekly meetings with Bill. Yes, Bill may have been a tough Army Ranger at one time, but Greg could see why so many of the men Bill had led as a Ranger stayed in touch with him. Bill was a great leader, especially to his family, and he was a great teacher who knew how to relate spiritual truths with illustrations from his military missions. Today was no different. As Greg and Bill continued their study of Acts chapter 20 and the Apostle Paul's speech to the leaders of the church in Ephesus, Bill recapped their previous lesson on leaders as shepherds to the church and dads as shepherds to their families. As their meeting progressed, the subject of being a watchman became the focus of their discussion. So it was appropriate for both Greg and Bill to share about some of the times in combat when things had gotten scary because someone had failed to properly alert the camp or fellow soldiers of impending danger. Greg commented that his base had almost been lost because the forward sentry hadn't warned everyone in time so they could properly set up a defensive position. We were lucky to survive that attack, Greg said. God was definitely protecting us that night. With that sober reflection, Bill and Greg opened their Bibles to continue their discussion of Acts chapter 20. The need for a watchman. After listening to the previous chapter, I hope you are grasping your role as the shepherd of your family, which is to feed and lead your flock. In this chapter, we're going to move on and look at another function that dads must perform. You are to watch and warn. The Apostle Paul described this responsibility to the Ephesian church leaders this way. After my departure, savage wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. Also from among yourselves men will rise up, speaking perverse things, to draw away the disciples after themselves. Therefore watch, and remember that for 3 years I did not cease to warn everyone night and day with tears. Acts chapter 20, verses 29 through 31. Paul knew the world is a desperate place, and the enemy, like savage wolves, is seeking to destroy the church. And, my friend, that same enemy is seeking to destroy your family. That is why you are needed to watch over your family. The role of a watchman. A dad who is the spiritual leader of his family is both a shepherd and a watchman. The main function of a shepherd is to feed and lead his flock, and an additional duty he has is that of a watchman. He is to watch over his flock, to protect it against predators. In Bible times, a watchman's responsibility was to keep a vigil at the city walls and warn the inhabitants when an enemy approached or some other kind of trouble threatened. At one point during the ministry of the Old Testament prophet Ezekiel, God appointed Ezekiel as a watchman. This meant Ezekiel's job was to listen to any warnings God spoke to him and pass them along to the people. God told Ezekiel that when he saw the enemy, he was to blow a trumpet and warn the people. Ezekiel chapter 33, verse 3. If the people heard the warning but did not heed it, then the people would be responsible for the consequences of not paying attention. Verse 4. However, in verse 6, God said that if a watchman failed to sound a warning to the people, then the watchman would be held accountable for any harm that came to the people. This makes it clear that a watchman play an important role in the safety and security of a city, or a church, or a home. With that in mind, what must he do to keep himself vigilant? A watchman keeps himself prepared. The Apostle Paul had spent 3 years in Ephesus shepherding a band of new believers. He had been a faithful watchman. He had paid careful attention to the enemy's tactics. He said, I know this, that after my departure, savage wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. Acts chapter 20, verse 29. A bit earlier, when Paul was saying farewell to the Ephesian church leaders and getting ready to move on to Jerusalem, he said, Therefore take heed to yourselves. Acts chapter 20, verse 28a. He reminded them that a good watchman needs to keep himself sharp. In this case, the Ephesian elders were to first watch over their own spiritual condition. A watchman keeps himself informed. He knows what to look for. In World War II, spotters were placed on remote islands in the South Pacific, along the path of Japanese planes and warships. To prepare them for their mission,